Well, with me now is Jonathan Sacerdoti, who is from the Campaign Against Anti-Semitism. Welcome to BBC News, Jonathan. Let's start with the immediate aftermath of Ken Livingstone's suspension, this announcement of an inquiry by the Labour Party and new rules, and we're told training for Labour MPs and other politicians. What do you make of that?
Well, it's quite extraordinary in 2016 to hear that Labour Party politicians and activists need training on how not to be racists. Our organisation obviously highlights anti-Semitism in all walks of life and all political parties, but when a problem has got so bad in one particular party that it feels it needs to put in place a specific inquiry and specific training protocols to how not to offend Jewish people, we know that there is in fact a crisis there.
It's curious though, isn't it, because traditionally many Jewish people have been members of the Labour Party and been very active on the Labour left. One thinks obviously in the 1930s, where things going much further back into British history when large Jewish population first arrived in this country, really returned to this country, I should say, in the 19th century. What's gone wrong?
It's a very good question, and there's been this phenomenon over time, and it's not that recent, in fact, of this shifting on the left against Jewish people in some respects, and particularly the left, on the further reach of the left, has been somewhat anti-Israel in a way that has really confused matters, and sometimes the passion that some on the left feel against Israel has really clouded their judgment and sometimes made them quite offensive to Jewish people in some of the things they've said and done.
Do you at least understand where that comes from? I mean, one thinks of the Palestinian issue unresolved now for the best part of 70 years.
Well, indeed, there's a complicated conflict going on in that region, but I think that what bothers many Jewish people is that there's this sort of football supporter attitude that you have to be either pro-Palestinian or pro-Israeli. And we hear often people who say things which are seen by the Jewish community as very anti-Semitic. These people sometimes defend what they say as saying, well, actually, it's just anti-Israel. In truth, this isn't a football match, so people don't need to be anti-Israel and anti-Palestinian or pro the other. But you can be critical
of Israeli government policy without necessarily desiring the end of the Israeli state.
Indeed, and being critical of any specific Israeli policy doesn't make you anti-Israel. Most importantly, 77% of Jewish people in a survey that we did last year found that they had witnessed anti-Semitic behaviour that they said was dressed up as criticism of Israel. And that's a huge proportion of the Jewish community who feel that this sort of thing is unacceptable.
Is there an accepted definition of what we mean by anti-Semitism to help us distinguish it from other forms of racism?
Well, that will be a very important part of this inquiry that the Labour Party is putting in place, and we're calling on them to start that inquiry by accepting the EU MC definition. That was an EU body that came up with the definition of anti-Semitism, which really clarifies all these points over Israel and Jewish people in a very clear way. And it's been accepted not just by us at the Campaign Against Anti-Semitism, it's also been posted on the gov.uk website by Sir Eric Pickles recently. It's been used by the EU Parliament itself, and the UK College of Policing also have adopted it. So this is a very good gold standard definition that we expect to see the Labour Party adopt now.
Let me ask you finally, we've talked about the Labour Party. It's fair to say, isn't it, these problems have arisen in other parties too?
Indeed, and you know, we look for anti-Semitism in all walks of life and all political parties. For example, people will remember people like David Ward and
former
other
Lib Dem MP in Bradford.
Exactly, yeah. And Jenny Tong, who've also been accused of anti-Semitism in the past. They are Liberal Democrats, for example. So
they would both say that they're not anti-Semitic, but they're critical of Israel.
They may well say that, but back to this 77% of British Jews who sometimes feel that people's criticism of Israel has veered over into something far worse. So this is a problem not restricted just to the Labour Party. It's something that needs to be resolved in all areas of life. But right now we're seeing so many reports of Labour characters coming out that the Labour Party has put in place its own investigation.
Jonathan Sacerdoti, thanks very much for being with us this morning.
Thank you.